Do you remember the feelings that you had that day?
A lot of fear, anger. There were no answers to strain on marriages. We talk about all of these things. Initially, it's a lot of sorrow, a lot of, okay, we're going to work really hard through this, and some anger of just feeling like there should be more answers.
Do you think there's still a stigma surrounding autism?
People will see behaviors and they'll just interpret it as a child who's trying to get their way. I do think it has made me understand humanity fundamentally in a way that I wouldn't be able to if I hadn't experienced life with my youngest son.
Welcome back to another episode of Get UnPuzzled. I'm your host, Whitney Price, and today we're excited to introduce a brand new series called UnPuzzled Stories. Every diagnosis tells a different story. Every family walks a different path, and no two journeys are the same, and each one is filled with different lessons of hope, heartbreak, resilience, and the power to remind each other that we are not alone. Through UnPuzzled Stories, we'll be sitting down with the parents and caregivers and families from across the state to share real moments behind the diagnosis, the challenges, the victories, and the unexpected turns and everything in between. Because every family's journey matters and every story deserves to be heard. Now let's dive in. Like many families, Elizabeth's journey hasn't followed the path that she expected. It's been filled with questions, obstacles, moments of uncertainty, and victories that only another parent walking this road could truly understand. Please join me in welcoming Elizabeth Campbell Malecki to UnPuzzled Stories. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to talk about your journey into autism with your son, Daniel. Can you talk to us a little bit about how your journey began?
When my youngest son started really struggling emotionally with certain things, I remember just the sense of meltdowns and not knowing kind of how to help him. He did not transition to solid food easily. Um, and I wasn't at that time, able to say or know that that was autism, but the journey has led me to that. And so for myself, it's been first just the fear of that term, the unknown of that term, having to learn to accept it. And I was not prepared for like falling into this world and just some of the difficulties that we as parents face where some of our like our pediatricians aren't able to give us answers that we want. There's this kind of conversation, for better or for worse, I guess you could call it, between, people wanting to label autism as a gift and people also really wanting to be able to express the real struggles that it creates in folks' lives and to be honest about that. Getting my youngest son diagnosed, and then at that point, the only ABA option I had was an hour and a 15-minute drive one way. I felt like the first year of trying to help my youngest son, Daniel, it kept me from being able to be as attentive to Caleb. Um, but, in our current reality, it's been interesting because, when you see the spectrum in some of its more obvious forms, you're allowed and able to see more of its uniqueness. And so I think for our whole family, like there's been a little bit more uh, understanding, or as like I like to tease the guys, like and all the men in my family. But and I guess like that's kind of jumping to a positive thing. And it really is positive. It's hard, but it's positive. But if you live with an individual whose nervous system is not like many of us and whose nervous system is more revved up. You live with an individual who doesn't naturally absorb language, um, who is more apt to repeat words, the end of words. I mean, your whole concept of language, whole concept of pronouns, communication, it's changed. And, as parents, as we who go through this, that's when we as parents start talking about, I think, the gift of all of this because we learn things and it makes us appreciate, and it's a struggle as well, but it also makes us appreciate how hard our kids work to communicate. And for those, like in my case, who had a son who's, when he did start talking, started like speaking in paragraphs, I think the term that was used at a recent retreat we had was inch stones, so it's like I love that the experience my oldest son has had. He is a very compassionate brother, and I also love, you know, just I think I would describe it as the constant ability to keep my expectations for Daniel high, and to, when he makes those marks, when he grows, to really recognize and be feel really proud about those things. Yeah, they don't happen like at the same rate as other children, but we know it's our, like, I think as moms, many times our nervous system's a little bit shot. I often use that
Oh,
language.
yeah, for sure.
If I had to exist and never have this experience, yes, it has been a definite challenge, but I do think it has made me understand humanity fundamentally in a way that I wouldn't be able to if I hadn't experienced life with my youngest son.
When you received that diagnosis, do you remember the feelings that you had that day?
Yeah, it was a lot of fear. There was some anger, because I had specific questions. I've really wanted to know a little bit more about like some integrative medical ways of treating autism. And I just felt like there were no answers to that. And, it's interesting because I remember probably a few weeks later going back and reading all of the paperwork that was given to me. And there were some really helpful things in that paperwork, but I wish more of it could have been brought to light in the conversation with me. But yeah, a lot of it's fear about Daniel's future. And there at that moment was the immediate question of, okay, like, how do we find ABA therapy? What is the next step that we need to take? I think that for myself, and I think this is very common, I've existed in the realm of he's going to get there. And existing in that realm it keeps pushing me forward. It pushed, I think, it's hard when you're a caregiver because you always realize what more you could be doing, but you're also a human being yourself, and there's only so many hours of the day. And so there's a lot of feelings of that, but I also been really grateful for the support. There's some people in my life who really know sensory difficulties and struggles, and they've been with us. But yeah, initially, it's a lot of sorrow, a lot of, okay, we're going to work really hard through this, and some anger of just feeling like there should be more answers, there should be more next steps for families.
How did you receive support when he first received his diagnosis? What types of support did you have?
At that point, a lot of it was through one of the therapists we were connected to with Birth to Three. Daniel was going to be quickly aging out of that, but that was really my main support. I remember talking to her like, they've given him this level and all of this, and like, is he really there? And she was able to just kind of take my mind away from focusing on that level language and focusing on what Daniel can do. And I did look like elsewhere. So I went into looking at podcasts. I did some coursework with a few different people that are more like not local because I wasn't finding local resources. So we went elsewhere. I took my son to a clinic in Roanoke one summer, shortly like that following, not that summer, but the summer after, to do something that's called like precision-based teaching, which is essentially ABA on steroids. It was a wonderful experience, but it was such a wonderful experience, but we didn't have anybody offering something like that near us. So it was like these 3 weeks, gratefully, a very supportive congregation. And left on a Monday, and Daniel had like a session Monday afternoon, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We drive back home, and we did that for 3 or 4 weeks. But so I was having to just look and find options and then try to learn, things that I just hadn't really been exposed to, but now had a real reason and motivation to try to learn.
Tell me a little bit about what the journey was like as far as the learning process. I know there's such a large learning curve that I had to go through with autism. What did you feel like was the biggest learning curve of all of this at the beginning?
Yeah. I think for myself, you're constantly told certain things, so you learn, like, especially if you choose to do ABA therapy, you learn very soon, okay, like there's functions of behavior, but to really see those in action and what they mean and how to help our kids. Probably one of the earliest things I tried to learn was trying to think of how am I going to transition Daniel to something, because transitions were very difficult and it was hard for us just to go inside our door. But I remember, like, I would try to, offer tangible reinforcement, like going into that door. So it was like I tried to be a step ahead, which is difficult. But also, as it comes to autism, first, it was just a lot of fear with the term. Now I don't have that fear at all. I mean, maybe a little bit, but it's more okay. Like, to me, autism is very much like a neurological condition. And yes, and related to communication, repetitive behavior, but it's so unique to individuals, how they experience it. Yeah. And going back to communication and how each of our kids what they will do to communicate. In some ways, now I can see it better and understand it better. In the beginning, it's a lot of tantrums.
Unpuzzled Parents Connect is a nonprofit organization founded by parents who understand firsthand the challenges of raising a child with autism and intellectual and developmental disabilities. Our mission is simple: to ensure that no family has to navigate this journey alone. Through free support groups, education trainings, advocacy, family events, community partnerships, and resources, we're working to build a world where every family feels supported, empowered, and connected. Everything we do is made possible through the generosity of donors, sponsors, grants, and volunteers who believe in our mission. If you'd like to learn more and support our work or connect with our community, you can visit our website at unpuzzledparentsconnect.com, or you can follow us on Facebook at Unpuzzled Parents Connect. Together, we're creating a world of acceptance, one family at a time. Now back to the episode. If you could go back to when Daniel first received that diagnosis, what would you tell yourself?
I would say something like he is not flawed. We're gonna get through this. Like, and honestly, the biggest thing that was helpful for me shortly after that is I started working with him at a table, and I had these flashcards, and it was like pictures of things, and he could point out like the duck and the everything. He could point it all out. He knew all his shapes. He could read color names, I mean, he's like maybe 3 at this point. And I'm thinking, okay, like, this isn't it gave me a lot of hope because I felt like there's so much going on there. But yeah, I think whenever we receive a diagnosis, Daniel also has been diagnosed with epilepsy. So that has also been a something to um, hold. But All of them are difficult. Um, I think you feel like you're wrestling with the unknown and you want somebody to give you a manual, like this is it. Um, but you know, two, in the midst of being angry and frustrated and sad, you also do experience professionals, therapists that really care. Daniel has a really wonderful school team, is a wonderful occupational therapist, and we've had wonderful ABA providers. I mean, so it's been encouraging, and I've had to learn how to hold all of it very loosely because it's like you really depend on folks and then like things change and it's hard. And I've had to really lean into faith that in every transition, there'll be someone there when I can't be there that will help Daniel. Um, Probably the hardest thing for me was voiced by someone else, but it was like, I think so many of us have felt that way of like, well, I can never die. You know,
Yes,
and
yes.
yeah, and that I'm a pastor, so obviously I know that death is a part of life, and I don't see death as a horrible thing, but I do recognize that that has been probably one of the hardest things for me because a lot of taking of Daniel to appointments, a lot of the medical decisions, I've been the captain of the ship, to use Mary Marfera's language. So I've been like trying to figure that out and have heartily taken that role on. Um, there are things that my husband does for Daniel that he is so much better at than me, but that has been my journey. And so, in its best manifestations, that shows up as me taking better care of myself. But yeah, it's just been a lot of what happens if I'm not there to take care of him. So, still working around that one.
I think that's such a honest fear that so many of us go through. I know I've felt it. I know we've talked about it in our therapies and our listening rooms that death and dying is just something that we can't do. We can't get that in our mind that it like you said, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. We can't live forever, at least not yet, you know. And that is something that weighs on our heart and that causes so much anxiety and so many of the what ifs and the challenges that we already don't know. Do you think a lot of parents' anxiety comes from that diagnosis, that initial, yes, you were right, your
Oh,
anxiety was actually on point?
yeah, I think that that's the hard thing for us is because once you have been one of the group of the percentage where things don't work out right, you're constantly on guard for that. And I do think that a lot of our anxiety relates back to that. It is really important to deal with our feelings and thoughts around the diagnosis because in parenting our kids, we want to keep the bar high and recognizing too that yes, there are different support needs. And I think I'm hopeful that the autism community is going to do a continual better job of having there be space for the children that are more profoundly impacted and space for their caregivers. That's been helpful for me is to go back to that diagnosis to say, okay, this is not a death sentence. This is information. And then to wrestle with all that stuff of what was it I did? What was it I missed? And kind of stop doing that to ourselves and also recognize that we are the ones who will help our kids. We are the ones who know them best. We are the ones who are most impacted by their success. We want to see a world that recognizes the differences of children. And there are many differences. It's not just, you know, related to sensory. There's so many other differences, but this is a real one. And if you have not experienced it, hopefully you'll have someone in your life who can open that door for you. Thinking of how hard it
Yeah.
is to go in through doors, but dealing with the diagnosis, the experience of the diagnosis helps us. And sometimes I think with the anxiety, it's just related to, sometimes where the anxiety will speak loudest when we're needing rest. So sometimes I've actually been really helped, Whitney, by the idea that there's anxiety that's instructive, and then there's anxiety that's kind of false anxiety and, non-instructive. And
Hmm.
so when we have that instructive anxiety that's kind of like, this isn't feeling right, or I need to maybe go and talk to this doctor or try this therapy, our anxiety is actually a good thing. Like, thank the Lord, we are conscientious and we worry and we're going to do something about it. But when it just hangs on and makes us feel miserable, we probably should do a little self-care and let it go.
Definitely. How do you think this diagnosis has changed you as a person?
Yeah, it is. I just experience life differently. I feel a sense of, I know what it's like to struggle. As a young pastor, my when people would come to me with struggles, it was like very much I wanted to be able to help. And I still want to do that. But I also come from a place of, I know struggles, I understand struggles. And I remember going to the zoo once and he wasn't there. And at that point, there were certain things that would have been really like, we would have had to stop here. We'd have to go here. And I was found myself being like, man, this is so like, what am I doing? Just going from one place to another. It's like, I'm grateful for who he is. And I feel like he is going to use the struggles he's experienced to help other people.
Definitely. I think so too. I think both of our boys are incredibly similar in a lot of ways that they have challenges, but also in a lot of ways that make them unique and exciting and different in the best way possible. And they are very routine and a little set in some ways. But like you said, I think some of the things that make them the most unique is also what's going to be what makes them thrive later in life. And they're both so charismatic, especially when they are together.
Yes.
And I know when we were talking about the transitions earlier, Connor has always struggled with transitions, even now, and he's almost 8. And you're right, you have to be one step ahead of them. And I remember when we would transition from the car just 10 feet to the door for therapy, I would have to have a reinforcement like a car or some type of, new play toy of some sort waiting for him to say, okay, we're going to this. And then the same thing when we would come back to the car. And that way of thinking changes you as a person, especially if you hadn't, you talked about going to the zoo and just being able to not pause as
Yeah.
much. It feels odd not to have them because we become accustomed to their routines as well. So we're thinking that, in the back of our minds, the things that we have to now watch for, it's like that guard never is truly come down to say, okay, you're safe. You can just go with the flow, go with the crowd. We're always thinking 10 steps ahead. Do you think that way of thinking ever completely turns off, or is it now just embedded in our mind and in our soul?
It's well, I will say, and I don't like, I have felt, I think that I'm someone that tends like I'll hype myself up to try to get whatever the list of things done that I have on my plate. And I have I am working on like trying to let some of that go. So I don't know. I think that for us as parents, we will hold on to this for a long time, but I am trying to relinquish some of the heaviness that feels like a burden. I do want to let go of some of the anxiety of what's the bad thing that could happen. So I'm trying to do that just because, that's the reality for all of us. It's harder for us
Definitely.
than in that percentage and wrestling with other diagnoses on top of that. So we just take it moment by moment.
Let's talk a little bit about community and having that emotional support. What does it feel like for you as a caregiver to a child with high support needs to have type of emotional support? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. Well, I am someone who, I'm a minister, and it was reinforced in to me even when I was in seminary, prior to seminary, like to be seeking out therapy as a support. So that's been something part of my life. I've loved the opportunity to connect with our Unpuzzled group with retreats and events. Sometimes it's just talking through the chat and sharing experiences together. I think that's been really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we met right around the time when our kids started going to therapy together. And I know even before we started way back when as a tiny support group that we connected immediately, not just because our kids happened to be playing together, but we had so much in common with the roller coaster of emotions and, of course, the similarities of our boys. And it seemed like we were going through so many different challenges at the same time, from potty training to transitions to, where they were going to go to school, if they were going to do homeschool or public school or, full-time ABA. And just there's such a list of challenges. And I thought it was so helpful to be able to have somebody else that was going through this crazy world that we were going through, and to be able to do that together was just such a relief. And yeah, I was incredibly happy that we had connected. And of course, our boys, especially. Do you think there's still a stigma surrounding autism in
Oh,
our
yeah.
community?
Yeah. I mean, I think that people still will think that children, children whose nervous systems are revved up. So, you'll bring your child into a store, and I think people can very much just interpret that as bad behavior. And I think people will say things like, that parent needs to be tougher. And I think most of us are
Yes.
like, oh, try that one out, friend. You'll see how unhelpful that is. So, there's a lot of like, because we talk a lot about how behavior is communication, and people will see behaviors, and they'll just interpret it as a child who's, trying to get their way. So I think there's still that. I think there's still a lot of a stigma around the term autism. I think there's still a sense of, um, like, I don't know how to describe that, but maybe like, oh, everybody's getting diagnosed with that. It's not really that. They'll just outgrow it. Like, oh man, I mean,
Yes.
wouldn't we love that? Like, I would love that. But
It's the unsolicited advice.
and that's really, and I think that's very hard for parents that have young children recently diagnosed, because you want that. And even within the pediatric world, a lot of pediatricians will still say things like, "Oh, but they give eye contact, or they're they want to be close to you." And I mean, that has constantly been my experience with my son, who is very much on the spectrum. So, I think unfortunately, I, th- I have felt very sad that even in the world of autism, things get divided into two camps, and there's like, controversy. It's like, really? Um, but so, and even maybe some of that's just related to stigma. But a lot of it is like, once we live it, we recognize. I mean, I love the saying that is also very common in our communities: once you've met one person on the autism spectrum, you've met one. Um, we have friends with a man who's um, a little older, and he's autistic, and he has been such a great resource. Like he will tell me things every now and then, like, oh, I saw Daniel do this and it reminded me of when I was younger. And um, I've really loved that kind of input. He'll share things with me that were helpful for him. And so yeah, I mean, so yeah, you get all the unsolicited advice, but you also do get a lot of love and the people who understand. I think there's a lot of wonderful professionals that really care, and um, I appreciate that as well.
One of the things that we try to lead with in our organization is our vision statement, which is creating a world of acceptance for our children to thrive in. What does that world look like?
Wow, that's a great question. I think I'm still trying to think that through. Um, I guess for me in this moment, I would say like there's space both not to clap, but also to help our children live in a world of clapping, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but like clapping is such a great example to me because Daniel hates it. He just hates it. And he's gotten to the point where he will tolerate it as long as those of us in his immediate family do not participate. Like, do not betray me and clap as well. Um, but why, And I think the reason for that is that I mean, I don't know this to be true, but it's almost like the sound of it is actually painful. And that's what, this when the sensory systems are more interrelated and connected. Um, so I think really like I'd love to see a world that can talk like that. Like I think sometimes we need to break down terms like autism and sensory and start talking more concretely for all of us to know like what is neurodivergence, and for there to be space for people who are, there's so many people who are autistic and communicative and able to so well describe, and I think that can be really helpful. I think Caitlin Parlow does a great job with that, and others. um, so yeah, I'd love there to be maybe a recognition at times that in some spaces we try to recognize that, just like you'll go into an office and there'll be like no perfumes or, things like that. Like maybe we acknowledge people in a variety of ways. We don't always say good job. We don't always,
Right.
you know, we don't always clap, but we try to maybe um, recognize there needs to be a diversity while also equipping our kids that, you know, um, how to be resilient in this world that's harder for them.
What about for the parent who just received their child's diagnosis? What's something that you want them to know?
Yeah. You didn't do anything wrong. Um, it may take you a while to believe that, but you are the person that will help them. And in order to help them, you need to be able to be present with them. And you need to trust your gut. This is a marathon. It is not a sprint. There will be moments that you will feel like you are sprinting. That is okay. There'll be moments where you feel like you just need to shut your brain off for a while, and that's okay. Like, it is a journey. It will change you. But try not to let it hurt you. Try not to see it as mere weakness, but recognize that, you've been the life that, yeah, that you've been given to parent is still such a meaningful life in however it manifests. And there are so many things for which we think we have control and we honestly don't. So the fact that you're facing this now will help you. I mean, yes, We talk about the strain on marriages, we talk about all of these things, but also, while true, it can also do the opposite. It can help
Yes,
marriages grow stronger. It can help parents learn more about themselves and one another, um, as you have to communicate in a better way, you know? So, um, that's what I would say. It's like, yeah, it is it is big pain and I'm gonna be good. It's awful, but it's also like it's a journey with so many marvelous gifts and, you've been somebody that has been given the opportunity to see them and to see your child in them. So,
definitely. What's something that you want other providers to know?
it's okay to be honest about what you know and what you don't know. Try to trust that parents are trying to do the best they can. Don't put things on your patient's charts that like you don't talk to them about. Don't be dismissive. Don't call your please don't call your parents mom. Like take the time to address them by their first name. And I think for all of us in our professional work, that's so important. Like be willing to engage and you are so appreciated because it is very hard work. And thank you for engaging with us.
Yeah, I think you nailed that. Be more personable. And I think leading with empathy is important too. I've talked with so many providers and parents that have said when they received their child's diagnosis, it was a simple sentence of, your child has autism or they are autistic. And that was it. There was no compassion. And it seemed like they were just sitting in their chair, listening and knowing only their side of the world, where our side oftentimes just feels so completely different at that point. So I think you're right. Give a little bit more compassion, empathy, and um, understanding, and be more personable. So, well, thank you for sharing your story and your journey. And I appreciate you so much. I appreciate the friendship, but I also really appreciate you having the willingness and the openness to share with us today. I think it's going to impact a lot of people. I think a lot of people will realize that they're not alone. And I love how every journey is so unique to the other.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for all that you empower us to do in Unpuzzled. It's so appreciated. And thank you for the space to speak. Hopefully, I haven't been too much like a pastor and talked too much.
Not at all.
And
Not at all. You've been
we can
great.
take that.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If this story resonated with you, would you take a moment to share it with someone who may need the reminder that they're not alone? Sometimes the right story at the right time can make all the difference. And before you go, please make sure to follow and subscribe to Get Unpuzzled wherever you listen to your podcasts so that you never miss another episode. To learn more about our mission and the work that we're doing through Unpuzzled Parents Connect, you can visit our website at unpuzzledparentsconnect.com, or you can follow us on Facebook at Unpuzzled Parents Connect. As a parent-founded nonprofit organization, we're committed to empowering families through advocacy, education, support, and community. Thanks again for being here.